I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had left a note, a single piece of paper on the kitchen counter explaining why I walked away. Would she have read it with shaking hands? Would she have cried, knowing that I had seen everything? Or would she have just crumpled it up, tossing my words away like she had already done with my trust? But I didn't leave a note. I didn't leave anything. I disappeared, and I did it without a single word. It all started with a phone call, a number I didn't recognize. Normally I wouldn't have answered, I never did, but that night, something in me, some gut instinct I couldn't ignore, made me press accept. At first, there was silence, a long pause, then a deep, slow exhale. If I were you, I'd check your wife's messages. Have a good night, buddy. Click. The call disconnected before I could say a word. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, heart hammering. My mind raced through possibilities. Wrong number? A prank? Some scammer messing with me? But my stomach twisted in a way I couldn't ignore. And even as I tried to tell myself it was nothing, my hands were already moving, unlocking Emily's laptop on the kitchen counter. Her password was the same as always, our anniversary. The date that suddenly meant nothing. The second her inbox loaded, my world cracked in half. A single message, unread, as if she hadn't even bothered to hide it. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. I felt a rush of blood to my head. My ears rang. I could barely breathe. My hand shook as I scrolled faster and faster. Through the weeks, no, months of messages. Wish I could see you again tonight, but my husband is home. Husband, that was me. She was talking about me like I was a burden, like I was some obstacle between her and the man she really wanted. My vision blurred. My mouth went dry. I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears, the sound of my own breathing ragged and uneven. Upstairs. The shower was running. She was humming, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I thought about storming upstairs, throwing the laptop into the bathroom, demanding answers. I thought about waiting for her to come downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table with the messages pulled up, letting her see the moment she lost me. But then I realized I didn't want an explanation. What could she possibly say that would make it better? That it was a mistake? That she loved me, but needed something else? That she had planned to tell me eventually? No, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of tears, of guilt, of pretending she was sorry so. I grabbed my car keys, my wallet, my passport, just the essentials. I walked to the door, hesitated for only a second, then stepped out into the night, and I never went back. The night swallowed me whole. The headlights of my car cut through the darkness. But beyond that, everything felt blurred, like I wasn't really there. Like I was watching myself from somewhere else, detached from my own body. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was in pieces. I had no destination, no plan, just distance. The first hour, I drove in silence, letting the road pull me further away from the life I had just abandoned. Every time I thought about Emily, about those messages, I felt my grip tighten, my pulse hammering in my skull. The words replayed in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. Wish I could see you again tonight, but my husband is home. A title that had become meaningless in an instant. I wanted to feel anger, wanted to feel anything other than this hollow emptiness. But the truth was, I didn't even have the energy for rage. I just felt disconnected, like I had left something behind that I'd never get back. A green highway sign flashed by, 80 miles to the next city. I didn't recognize the name. I didn't care. I just kept going. Somewhere around midnight, I stopped. At a gas station, the kind that looks the same no matter what state you're in. Flickering fluorescent lights, a dingy restroom, a cashier who barely looked up from his phone. I filled my tank, walked inside, and grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum. As I stood at the register, I caught my reflection in the security mirror above the counter. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. Messy hair, dark circles under my eyes, a blank expression. The cashier handed me my change. "You all right, man?" I blinked, forced a nod. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't. Push! I walked back to my car and sat there for a while, staring at my phone. I had turned it off before leaving, but now I hesitated. Was she looking for me? Had she even noticed I was gone? Would she care? I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. A few missed calls. One from Emily, two from an unknown number. Texts. She had called once. Once, then nothing. Maybe she hadn't realized I was gone yet. Maybe she was still in the shower when I left, still living in the illusion that everything was normal. Or maybe... Maybe she knew. Maybe she had seen my empty closet, my missing bag, and decided not to chase after me. Maybe she was with him. I turned the phone off again and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I wasn't ready to face it. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. The road stretched ahead, endless and uncertain. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea where I was going. The night turned into morning while I was still on the road. I don't even remember how many miles I had driven, how many small, nameless towns I had passed through, each one blending into the next like a dream that refused to end. I had no map, no plan, no direction, only one goal: stay gone. Somewhere along the way, exhaustion set in. My eyes burned, my hands ached from gripping the wheel, and my mind felt sluggish, drowning under the weight of everything I was trying not to think about. I needed to stop. I pulled into a motel off the highway. One of those run-down, forgotten places where the neon sign flickered and the parking lot was half empty, the kind of place no one asked questions. It was perfect. I stepped out of the car, stretching my stiff muscles, and walked into the lobby. The air smelled like stale cigarettes and old carpet. A bored-looking woman sat behind the desk, flipping through a magazine. She barely glanced up as I approached. "Need a room?" said my voice rough from hours of silence. She chewed her gum slowly. "Just you?" "Yeah, cash or card?" "Cash." I had pulled out everything I could from my bank before I left. No digital trail. No way for Emily or anyone else to find me. She slid the key across the counter. "Room 14, end of the hall." I nodded, grabbed the key, and left without another word. The room was exactly what I expected. Peeling wallpaper, a stiff bed. TV from the early 2000s that buzzed when it was on. It didn't matter. It wasn't home. But then again, I didn't have a home anymore. I tossed my bag onto the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. The weight of it all was starting to settle in now. The fact that I had left, that I wasn't going back, that Emily was probably still asleep in our bed, oblivious. Or worse, awake and not caring. I reached for my phone, hesitating. Against my better judgment, I turned it on. The screen lit up. One missed call, Emily. Just one. That was all. No messages, no frantic texts, no apologies. That should have told me everything I needed to know. And yet, I stared at the screen, waiting, as if somehow, through sheer force of will, I could make her care, make her regret it. Nothing happened. I tossed the phone onto the nightstand, ran a hand over my face, and lay back on the bed. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. My mind refused to shut off. It kept replaying everything: the messages, the call from the unknown number, the way my feet had moved on their own, carrying me out of the house like I had been programmed to leave. I should have felt anger. I should have felt something. All I felt was numb. I had spent years building a life only to become a stranger in it overnight. And now I was a man without a name, without a home, without a past, just a ghost, drifting through places no one would remember. I woke up to the sound of tires rolling over gravel. For a split second, my brain thought I was back home, lying in my bed, waking up next to Emily like I had 1,000 times before. The hazy fog of sleep made me believe I'd hear the soft rustling of sheets, feel the warmth of her body next to mine, maybe even hear her mumbling something about needing coffee before she could function. But then reality set in. I wasn't home. Wasn't even sure where home was anymore. I blinked up at the ceiling, the ugly yellow light casting long, jagged shadows from the cracked blinds. The air smelled like old carpet and cheap cleaning products. The motel room was still the same as last night, stale impersonal. A place built for people like me who didn't want to be found. Rolling onto my side, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The battery was almost dead. I debated turning it back on, but the last time I had checked, there had been nothing. No desperate messages from Emily, no calls asking where I was, just that single missed call. One. That was all she had given me. I tossed the phone onto the mattress and sat up, rubbing a hand over my face. My body felt heavy, sluggish, like it hadn't quite caught up with my new reality. I needed coffee. Grabbing my wallet, I stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, cool. The sky was overcast. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a couple of trucks parked near the entrance. The world felt muted, distant, like I was moving through a dream. There was a diner across the road, the kind of place that probably hadn't changed since the 80s. A flickering neon sign read, "Maggie's," in dull red letters. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee drifted through the open door. As I walked in, the place was nearly empty. A man in a baseball cap sat hunched over the counter, stirring his coffee absently. A waitress wiped down a table, humming along to the old country song playing on the jukebox. I took a seat in the corner, my back against the wall where I could see the entire room. Old habit. A woman in her 50s walked over, notepad in hand. "Morning, hun. What can I get you?" "Coffee black." My voice sounded rough, unused. She nodded. "You look like you could use something to eat, too." I wasn't hungry, but I nodded anyway. "Whatever's good." She gave me a knowing look before disappearing into the back. I leaned back against the booth. Staring out the window, the highway stretched on in the distance, endless, leading to places I didn't know. I tried to imagine where I'd be in a week, a month, a year. Would I still be driving, still running from the ghost of my past? Or would I find a place to land, some forgotten town where no one knew my name? I barely noticed when the waitress set the coffee down in front of me. I took a sip. It was strong, bitter, but it grounded me. And then, for the first time since I left, I let my mind wander back to Emily. What was she doing right now? Had she woken up and realized I was gone? She sat up in bed, reaching for me, only to find an empty space. Had she even cared? I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. The answer to that question was obvious. No. If she had cared, she would have called again. She would have texted. She would have tried. Instead, she had given me nothing. The waitress set a plate in front of me. Scrambled eggs, toast, bacon. I picked at it absently, my appetite non-existent. The bell above the door jingled, and someone walked in, a man in a brown jacket, mid-40s, with tired eyes. He looked around before taking a seat at the counter. Something about him felt familiar. Not his face, but the weight he carried in his shoulders, the way he slumped slightly as he sat down. A man running from something. Maybe from himself. Maybe like me, from a past that had shattered overnight. I stared into my coffee, the steam curling into the air. For the first time, I wondered how many people in this diner were ghosts of themselves. How many had left behind lives they couldn't bear to face anymore, and how many, like me, had left without saying goodbye. I pressed my fingers against my temples. I had to stop thinking like this. I had to move forward, because if I kept looking back, I knew I'd never escape. I spent hours in that diner, staring into my coffee, listening to the hum of conversations around me, watching people come and go like waves on the shore. The plate of eggs and bacon sat mostly untouched, my appetite drowned in thoughts I didn't want to have, every time. I tried to push Emily out of my mind. She clawed her way back in, dragging her betrayal with her. I should have felt anger, that burning, all-consuming rage people talk about when they're betrayed. But I didn't. I felt empty, like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside, leaving nothing but skin and bones behind. It wasn't until the waitress came by for the third time to refill my coffee that I realized I had been there too long. She gave me a polite smile, but didn't say anything. Just glanced at the plate I hadn't touched and walked away, left a few bills on the table, and stood up, stretching my stiff legs before heading to the restroom. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting a dull, almost sickly glow over the cracked tiles and rust-stained sink. I stepped up to the mirror and stared at the man looking back at me. I didn't recognize him. Dark circles under his eyes, hollow cheeks. The stubble on his jaw was uneven, rough, as if he had stopped caring about keeping himself presentable. His shirt was wrinkled, his collar stretched, his hair a mess. He looked like someone who had been lost for years, not just a few days. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face, hoping it would snap me out of whatever state I was in. But the feeling didn't go away, that sinking, unbearable. Feeling that I wasn't just lost, I had nothing to return to. I grabbed a paper towel and dried my hands, avoiding my reflection this time. What was the point in looking? I didn't want to see the version of myself that Emily had turned me into as I stepped out of the restroom. My eyes immediately went to the man sitting at the counter, the one in the brown jacket who had walked in earlier. He wasn't eating. Fingers tapped against his coffee mug, his gaze unfocused, like he was somewhere far away in his head. I should have ignored him. He was just another stranger passing through. But something about the way he carried himself, the same kind of weight, pressing on his shoulders that I felt on mine, made me stop. Before I could change my mind, I walked over and sat down on the stool next to him. He didn't look up right away. Just kept tapping his fingers against the mug like he was playing an invisible piano. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. "Night?" I asked, my voice hoarse from lack of use. He let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. More like a rough life. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. "Been on the road long?" he asked, finally looking at me. His eyes were sharp but tired, like a man who had seen too much and survived just enough. "A few days," I admitted, "not sure where I'm going." He smirked, stirring his coffee. "That makes two of us." For a while, neither of us spoke, just two men. Sitting in a roadside diner, sipping bad coffee, running from something we didn't have the guts to face. I didn't know his story, and I didn't ask. He didn't ask for mine either. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some people don't need explanations. Maybe they just need to know they aren't the only ones floating through life without an anchor. Eventually, he finished his coffee, threw a few bills on the counter, and stood up. "Take care of yourself," he said. "You too," I replied, watching as he walked out the door and disappeared into the parking lot. I sat there for another few minutes before I grabbed my own keys and followed. It was time to keep moving, because staying still meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. And I wasn't ready for that yet. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a long strip of faded asphalt that seemed to disappear into nothingness. I had been driving for hours since leaving the diner, my hands stiff around the steering wheel, my mind an endless reel of memories I didn't want to replay. The air inside the car was stale, heavy, and I had rolled down the window in an attempt to clear my head, but it didn't help. I told myself I wasn't running. I was just going. But going where? That was the real question. The gas tank was running low, forcing me to stop at another nameless town that looked exactly like the last one. One main street, few scattered houses, and a gas station that had probably been there since the 70s. I pulled into the lot, stepping out of the car, stretching my legs before making my way inside. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and an older man behind the counter gave me a slow, assessing glance before going back to whatever was playing on the small, dusty TV in the corner, some local news channel, something about a missing person out. I tried not to let my mind go there. I grabbed a bottle of water and a protein bar. It's the kind of meal you eat when you don't care about food, just survival. As I made my way to the counter, I caught a glimpse of myself in the convex mirror above the register. Still the same stranger, still the same hollow, unreadable face. The cashier, a man who looked like he had seen his fair share of wandering, souls rang me up without a word. He took my cash, slid my change across the counter, then finally said, "Storm's coming." I blinked, looking out the window. The sky had darkened, thick clouds rolling in from the west. "Bad one?" he asked, mostly. For the sake of conversation, he nodded. "Wouldn't be driving too far if I were you." I thought about getting back in the car and pushing through, but something in his tone made me hesitate. A storm wasn't what I needed right now. I was already drowning in my own. You got a motel around here?" The man smirked like he had been expecting the question. He jerked his thumb toward the road. "Couple miles down. Place called Miller's Rest. Ain't fancy, but it's got a roof." That was all I needed. I thanked him, grabbed my things, and walked back to the car. As I pulled onto the road, I could already feel the change in the air, the way the wind had picked up, the eerie quiet that settled in before the sky broke open. Miller's Rest wasn't hard to find. It was exactly what I expected, an old roadside motel with a flickering neon sign, the kind of place where no one asks questions. I parked near the entrance and walked into the small lobby. The woman behind the desk looked up from her book, gave me a quick glance, then slid the guest book toward me. "Cash only," she said. I nodded, scribbled a fake name, and handed her a few bills. She took them without hesitation and slid me a key. Room 7. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Musty was exactly what I expected. Musty carpet. A bed that had seen better days, a nightstand with an old lamp that flickered when I turned it on. But it had 4 walls, and right now, that was enough. I tossed my bag onto the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples. A year ago, I had a home, a wife, a life that made sense. Now, I was here, somewhere no one knew my name, somewhere I didn't even belong. The rain started just as I lay back against the pillows, the sound steady against the window, filling the silence with something softer. For the first time since leaving, I let myself close my eyes. And for the first time, I wondered if I had really disappeared or if I had simply never existed in the first place. I woke up to the sound of heavy rain hitting the window, the wind howling through the cracks in the motel walls. The storm had arrived in full force, turning the night into a restless, chaotic blur. For a second, I forgot where I was. My body tensed, expecting the familiar warmth of my bed, the scent of coffee drifting in from the kitchen, Emily's soft breathing beside me, but that life was gone. I sat up slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. The room was dim, the lamp on the nightstand flickering slightly, as if it was debating whether or not to stay alive. The air smelled of damp wood and stale cigarette smoke, the kind of scent that clung to places meant for people passing through. I wasn't sure how long I had slept. It could have been an hour, maybe 2, but I still felt drained, like sleep hadn't done anything but keep my body still while my mind ran circles around itself. I glanced toward my bag, where my phone lay untouched. I hadn't turned it on since the gas station. I told myself I wouldn't, that I had nothing to check, nothing to wait for. But the temptation gnawed at me, an itch I couldn't ignore. I grabbed the phone, pressing the power button. The screen lit up, the brightness cutting through the dark like a knife. One missed call from her. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to breathe through it. One call, that was all. No voicemail, no text. I stared at the screen, willing it to ring again, but nothing happened. She wasn't searching for me. She wasn't chasing after me. She had called once and then let me disappear. I set the phone back down, resisting the urge to throw it against the wall. What had I expected? That she'd be in a panic, that she'd leave 100 messages begging me to come home, that she'd realize too late that I had been worth fighting for. No, she had made her choice the moment she sent those messages to someone else. I exhaled sharply and pushed myself off the bed, walking into the small motel bathroom. The mirror above the sink was cracked in one corner, distorting the reflection. Slightly, I ran the tap, splashing cold water onto my face, gripping the sides of the sink as I stared at the man in the glass, a man who didn't recognize himself anymore. Dark circles under his eyes, a hollow stare. A man who had been erased from his own life and had nothing left to hold on to. I turned off the water, gripping the sink harder. I'd always believed in fighting for things, for love, for loyalty. I had always thought that if 2 people had something real, they could get through anything, but I was wrong. Some things weren't meant to be fixed. Some things weren't worth fighting for. I stepped back from the mirror and walked out of the bathroom. I needed air. The rain had slowed, though the wind still howled through the trees, making the old motel sign creak. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself and started walking. I didn't know where I was going, maybe just anywhere but inside those 4 walls that felt too small, too suffocating. The town was nearly dead at this hour. The main street was empty, save for a few streetlights casting their dim glow over the pavement. The few businesses that lined the road were closed, their signs flickering in the wind. A gas station, a diner, a bar with neon lights that buzzed. Faintly I kept walking, my feet carrying me forward without direction, without thought. Somewhere along the way I stopped in front of a storefront, my eyes catching the reflection in the glass. A stranger stood there, staring back at me. I wasn't that man who had left home a few days ago. That man had a routine, a purpose, a life that felt stable, even if it had been built on a lie. This man, the one in the glass, was someone else entirely. Someone who didn't exist. I turned away and kept walking, disappearing into the quiet streets of a town that had never known my name. The days blurred into weeks. The weeks turned into months. Before I knew it, a whole year had passed. Since I walked out that door without a word, a year since I erased myself from the life I had built. At first I thought about going back, not to Emily, not to my old life, but to some kind of closure. Something to anchor myself so I wouldn't feel like a ghost haunting the edges of reality. But the longer I stayed gone, the more I realized there was nothing left for me to return to. I moved through towns like a shadow, never staying in one place too long. I picked up odd jobs, bartending, working at gas stations, even construction for a while. It didn't matter what I did, as long as it kept my mind occupied, as long as it kept me from thinking too much. And then one night, she found me. It was in a small town I had stopped in, just another place on the map, another temporary home, had no real attachment to. I was working in a quiet bar, wiping down glasses behind the counter when I heard the door chime. I glanced up, ready to greet the customer, and there she was. Emily. Her hair was different, shorter. Her face was thinner. Her eyes hollowed in a way I had never seen before, but it was her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She took a slow step forward, her hands trembling at her sides. She swallowed hard. I've been looking for you. I exhaled through my nose, setting the glass down carefully. Didn't look very hard. She flinched, and for a brief second, I saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. Real, raw regret. I messed up, she whispered. I know that. She exhaled sharply, gripping the back of the nearest chair. I've spent the last year thinking about what I did, about how I ruined everything, and God, I don't know what I thought I'd find when I finally saw you again. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. I thought maybe, double quotes. She swallowed. Maybe you'd still care. I didn't respond right away. Let the silence stretch between us, thick and heavy. Did I care? Maybe in another lifetime, in another version of myself, I would have. Maybe if she had found me a year ago, if she had tried harder, if she had fought for me the way I once would have fought for her, things would have been different. But that man, the one who would have stayed, who would have tried to fix things, he didn't exist anymore. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my jaw. You know, for a long time I kept waiting for you to call, for you to explain, to apologize, to do something, but you didn't. You let me go. And now, after a whole year, you show up here expecting what? That I'll just forget everything? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't expect anything, I just... She shook her head. Just needed to see you. I watched her for a moment. The way her shoulders shook, the way she hugged herself like she was trying to hold herself together. Once upon a time, I would have reached for her, pulled her close, told her that we could fix this. But not anymore. I nodded slowly. Well, now you've seen me. Her face crumbled, and she let out a shaky breath, nodding. I could see the realization. Settling in, I wasn't coming back. I wasn't the same man she had betrayed. No matter how much time had passed, some things just couldn't be undone. She took a step back, wiping at her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded again. Me too. And that was it. She turned and walked out of the bar, disappearing into the night, the same way I had a year ago. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, staring at the door long. After she was gone, and then finally,